A homeless boy, a sketch on the sidewalk. A millionaire stops and freezes, because the face staring back at him was someone dead for decades. This story isn't about art, it's about blood. Tell me where you're listening from. The crowd parted around the small figure hunched on the sidewalk, most people not even glancing down as they hurried past. 10-year-old Leo sat cross-legged on a flattened cardboard box, his thin fingers blackened with charcoal as they moved across a scrap of paper with surprising precision. Despite the chill of the autumn morning, sweat beaded on his forehead as he concentrated, occasionally brushing his unruly dark hair from his eyes with the back of his wrist. What if talent isn't something you're born with, but something that finds you when you have nothing else left? Leo had discovered his gift for drawing faces 3 months ago, after he and his grandmother had been evicted from their apartment. The portraits he created from scraps of discarded paper and stubby pencils had become their lifeline, sometimes earning enough for a hot meal or a night in a cheap motel when the weather turned brutal. The smell of coffee from the nearby cafe, mingled with car exhaust and the lingering dampness from last night's rain. Leo's stomach growled, but he pushed the hunger away, focusing instead on capturing the delicate laugh lines around the eyes of the woman he was sketching from memory, a kind bakery owner who sometimes gave him day-old bread when no one was looking. Most people think being homeless means you stop being human, Grandma Rosa had told him the night they'd first slept in the shelter. But we're still the same people, Leo. We still have the same hearts and dreams, never forget that. Leo's fingers paused over the paper. His grandmother had been coughing again this morning, a deep rattling sound that scared him more than he wanted to admit. The shelter was overcrowded and noisy, making it impossible for her to rest properly. He needed to sell at least 3 portraits today if they were going to afford her medicine. "Hey kid, how much?" A businessman in a hurry barely slowed as he gestured toward Leo's small collection of finished drawings displayed on the cardboard beside him. $5, sir," Leo said, his voice quiet but clear. The man scoffed and continued walking, already talking into his phone. Leo swallowed his disappointment and returned to his work. He was used to being invisible. 2 blocks away, Harrison Wells stepped out of his chauffeur-driven car, instructing his driver to wait. At 48, Wells had amassed a fortune in real estate development, turning forgotten neighborhoods into luxury high-rises. Today's meeting was about his newest acquisition, a rundown block of buildings that would soon become exclusive condominiums. The old tenants had already been cleared out, their leases terminated with the minimum required notice. "I should be about an hour, James," he told his driver before heading toward the sleek glass building where his architects waited to present their latest designs. Harrison checked his watch, Italian worth more than what most people earned in months, and frowned at the small crowd blocking the sidewalk ahead. As he approached, he realized people were gathering around something, or someone, on the ground. Probably one of the area's many homeless, he thought with irritation. This was exactly the kind of element his development would eliminate from the neighborhood. He moved to walk around the small crowd when a glimpse of something made him stop. Through a gap between onlookers, he caught sight of a small boy hunched over a piece of paper, his hand moving with surprising confidence as he sketched. Something about the scene tugged at Harrison's memory, a long-buried fragment of his past that he couldn't quite place. Curiosity overcoming his usual indifference, Harrison stepped closer. The boy was finishing a portrait of an elderly woman. The drawing was surprisingly skilled, capturing not just her features but something of her character, a quiet dignity, despite what appeared to be difficult circumstances. "How much?" Harrison found himself asking, the question emerging before he'd consciously decided to speak. Leo looked up, momentarily startled by the well-dressed man addressing him directly. $5, sir," he answered, his voice steadier than his nervous fingers. Harrison reached for his wallet, but his eyes caught on another drawing partially visible beneath the others. He could only see a fragment, the curve of a woman's smile, the shape of her eyes, but it was enough to make his heart stutter in his chest. "That one," he said, pointing. "Let me see that one." Leo hesitated, then carefully extracted the portrait Harrison had indicated. It was a woman with warm eyes and a gentle smile, her hair swept back from her face in a style popular decades ago, Harrison stared at the portrait, the blood draining from his face as he recognized the subject. It was impossible. It couldn't be. The boy couldn't possibly know her. "Where did you see this woman?" Harrison demanded, his voice suddenly harsh. "Who is she to you?" The small crowd that had gathered sensed the tension and began to drift away, leaving Leo alone with the suddenly intimidating stranger. "I don't know her name, sir," Leo said, confusion and fear mingling in his voice. "She comes to me in my dreams sometimes. I draw the faces I see in my head when I can't sleep at the shelter." Harrison's hand trembled as he held the portrait. The woman in the drawing was his mother. His mother exactly as she had looked in the only photograph he had of her. A photograph kept locked in his private safe that no one, absolutely no one, had seen in over 30 years. "How much for this one?" Harrison's voice was barely audible. "It's not for sale," Leo replied, suddenly protective of the drawing. It was one of his favorites, though he didn't know why. Something about her eyes made him feel safe. "I can draw you something else if you'd like." Harrison stared at the boy, really seeing him for the first time. The worn clothes, the thin face, the dark circles under eyes too old for his young face, and something else. Something that sent a chill through his body. The shape of the boy's eyes, the curve of his jaw. Features Harrison saw every morning in his own mirror. Features that had belonged to his mother. "What's your name?" Harrison asked, his world tilting on its axis. "Leo," the boy answered simply. "Leo Rivera." Rivera. Harrison's breath caught. His mother's maiden name had been Rivera, a detail he had spent decades trying to erase from his past along with the poverty and shame of his early childhood. "And your parents?" Harrison asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Where are they?" Leo's gaze dropped to the ground. "I never knew my dad. My mom died when I was a baby. It's just me and my grandma now." He glanced back up at Harrison. "She's sick. I need to sell some drawings today for her medicine." Harrison couldn't take his eyes off the portrait or the boy who had drawn it. The resemblance was undeniable, now that he allowed himself to see it. But it was impossible, it had to be, unless... The memory hit him with physical force. Sophia, his high school girlfriend from the old neighborhood, telling him she was pregnant just as he was about to leave for college on a scholarship that would be his ticket out of poverty. He had denied the child was his, accused her of trying to trap him, and walked away without looking back. He'd never returned to the old neighborhood, never asked what became of her or the baby. Harrison's phone rang in his pocket, his architect wondering where he was, but Harrison couldn't move. Frozen in place by the past he'd tried so hard to outrun, and by the impossible fact that the homeless boy sitting on the sidewalk in front of him might be his grandson. Harrison's phone continued to ring, the sound jarring him back to reality. He silenced it without looking, unwilling to break eye contact with Leo, afraid the boy might somehow vanish if he looked away. "These drawings," Harrison said, gesturing to Leo's small collection, his voice steadier than he felt. "They're remarkable. Would you be willing to show me more?" Leo glanced down at his worn watch. A hand-me-down from a shelter. Volunteer. Too big for his thin wrist and held together with tape. "I need to get back to my grandma soon. She doesn't like me staying out too long." "I understand," Harrison said quickly. "What if I bought all of these?" He gestured to the displayed portraits. "Would that help with your grandmother's medicine?" Leo's eyes widened. "All of them. But..." He hesitated. "The one of the lady isn't for sale." Harrison nodded, a strange tightness in his throat. "I respect that. But I'd like to buy the rest. In fact..." He reached into his wallet and pulled out several crisp $100 bills. "Would this help you and your grandmother?" Leo stared at the money, his mouth slightly open. It was more cash than he had ever seen at once. His grandmother's medication cost $80, money they simply didn't have. The shelter could only help so much, and the free clinic had a 3-week waiting list. "Why?" Leo asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. His grandmother had warned him about strangers offering things that seemed too good to be true. "Why would you give me so much?" Harrison hesitated. What could he say? That he suspected this boy might be his grandson? That 25 years ago he had abandoned a pregnant girlfriend to pursue his ambitions? That the portrait Leo had drawn was forcing him to confront a past he had spent decades burying? "I appreciate art," Harrison said finally, the half-truth, bitter on his tongue. "And I'd like to help, no strings attached." Leo's face showed he wasn't entirely convinced, but the thought of his grandmother's worsening cough overcame his hesitation. He carefully gathered the drawings, leaving only the one of the mystery woman, and handed them to Harrison. "Thank you, sir," he said formally, accepting the money and tucking it securely into his shoe, the way his grandmother had taught him. Harrison felt an unexpected stab of pride at the boy's caution. Smart kid. "Leo," he said, making a sudden decision, "I'd like to meet your grandmother. Perhaps I could help with more than just medicine." Leo's expression closed immediately. "We don't need charity." "It's not charity," Harrison said quickly, realizing his mistake. I'm interested in your talent. I know people in the art world. Maybe I could help you develop your skills." Leo considered this, clearly torn. "I have to ask my grandma first. She doesn't trust easy." "Of course," Harrison nodded. "Where can I find you tomorrow?" "We're usually here in the mornings," Leo said after a moment's hesitation. "Grandma sits on that bench over there while I draw." He pointed to a bench partially visible around the corner, currently occupied by a young couple sharing coffee. Harrison nodded, trying to appear casual while his mind raced. Tomorrow. He would meet the boy's grandmother tomorrow and find out the truth. His architects would have to wait. "I'll see you tomorrow then," he said, tucking Leo's drawings carefully into his leather portfolio. "Take care of yourself, Leo." As Harrison walked away, his entire body felt strange, as if he were moving through water. 25 years of carefully constructed identity. Harrison Wells, self-made man, real. Estate mogul suddenly felt hollow. He had remade himself, erasing every trace of Harry Rivera, the scholarship kid from the wrong side of the tracks. He had changed his name legally on his 18th birthday, cutting all ties to his past. Only his mother had known his new identity, and she had died 15 years ago, taking his secret to her grave. Or so he had thought. The meeting with his architects passed in a blur. Harrison nodded at appropriate moments, approved plans without seeing them, his mind consumed with questions. How could Leo have drawn his mother so perfectly? The portrait captured her exactly as she had appeared in the only photograph Harrison had kept, the one locked in his office safe that no one had access to. When the meeting ended, Harrison returned to his penthouse apartment and went straight to his office. He unlocked the safe hidden behind an abstract painting worth more than most people's homes and removed a small worn envelope. Inside was a single photograph. A young woman with warm eyes and a gentle smile, her dark hair swept back from her face. The resemblance to Leo's drawing was uncanny, not just the features but the essence of her, the kindness in her eyes. Harrison poured himself a drink with shaking hands. Could the boy really be his grandson? The timing made it possible, if Sophia had been pregnant when he left. But why would Leo be drawing his mother? It made no sense. Unless... Harrison set down his glass and reached for his phone. "James," he instructed his assistant, "I need you to find someone for me, Sophia Rivera. We went to high school together." He paused. "And James, I need all the information you can find on a homeless woman named Rosa Rivera. She should be in her 60s or 70s. She has a grandson named Leo, about 10 years old. They're staying at a shelter somewhere in the city." After ending the call, Harrison spread Leo's drawings across his desk. Each portrait captured not just physical features but something deeper, the essence of the person. There was an old man with weather-beaten skin and eyes full of stories, a young woman with a defiant tilt to her chin, a child with a hesitant smile. Each face seemed familiar somehow, though Harrison was certain he had never met these people. He returned to the portrait of his mother again and again, unable to explain how Leo could have drawn her so perfectly. Was it possible the boy had seen the photograph somehow? But that was impossible. No one had access to his safe, and he had never displayed the photograph. He had spent decades trying to forget his past, not commemorate it. Harrison barely slept that night, his dreams filled with fragments of memories he had long suppressed. His mother working multiple jobs to support him after his father left. The cramped apartment they had shared. Her hands, always rough from work but gentle when they touched his face. Her voice telling him he could be anything, go anywhere if he worked hard enough. The day he had told her he was changing his name, erasing the last connection to his father who had abandoned them. The hurt in her eyes that she had quickly hidden, telling him she understood. Morning found him exhausted, but resolute. He dressed, casually, avoiding his usual tailored suits, and instructed his driver to take him back to the street corner where he had met Leo. He arrived early, his stomach tight with anticipation and dread. The corner was empty, the cardboard where Leo had sat undisturbed. Harrison checked his watch and settled on a nearby bench to wait. 1 hour passed, then another. Leo didn't appear. By noon, Harrison's concern had grown into alarm. He approached a street vendor selling coffee from a cart nearby. "The boy who draws portraits," Harrison said. "Have you seen him today?" The vendor shook his head. "Leo? No, I haven't seen the kid or his grandma. Might be at the hospital again, the old lady, she ain't been doing so good." "Hospital?" Harrison repeated, his chest tightening. "Which one?" The vendor shrugged. "City General, probably. That's where they take folks without insurance." Harrison was back in his car within moments, directing his driver to City General Hospital. As the car pulled away from the curb, his phone rang. It was James. "Sir, I've found some information about Sofia Rivera," his assistant said without preamble. "She died 11 years ago. Car accident." There was a pause. "She had a son, sir. Michael Rivera." Harrison's grip tightened on the phone. "And?" "Michael Rivera died 3 years ago. Drug overdose. He left behind a son, Leonardo Rivera, now 10 years old. The boy's legal guardian is his great-grandmother, Rosa Rivera." Harrison closed his eyes as the pieces fell into place. Leo wasn't his grandson. He was his great-grandson. "There's something else, sir," James continued, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Rosa Rivera was admitted to City General Hospital last night. Pneumonia, apparently. It's serious." Harrison felt as though the air had been punched from his lungs. "I'm on my way there now," he managed to say before ending the call. As the car sped toward the hospital, Harrison stared unseeingly at the city passing by outside his window. For the first time in decades, he allowed himself to think of Sofia. Her smile, her determination, her hurt when he had denied their child and walked away. She had raised their son alone, it seemed, and now their great-grandson was alone except for an elderly great-grandmother who might be dying. The realization struck him with physical force. Leo had been drawing family members he had never met. Somehow, impossibly, the boy had drawn Harrison's mother, his own great-great-grandmother, exactly as she had looked in the only existing photograph of her. Harrison had spent his life running from his past, building walls to protect himself from the pain of abandonment and the shame of poverty. Now that past had found him anyway, in the form of a homeless boy with an inexplicable gift, drawing portraits of ghosts. City General Hospital buzzed with the controlled chaos, typical of underfunded public institutions. Harrison strode through the sliding doors, immediately out of place in his designer clothes among the worried families in worn attire. The sharp smell of disinfectant couldn't quite mask the underlying sense of illness and anxiety. "I'm looking for Rosa Rivera," Harrison told the reception desk, trying to keep the urgency from his voice. "She was admitted last night." The receptionist typed the name into her computer with practiced efficiency. "Are you family?" she asked without looking up. Harrison hesitated, the word catching in his throat. "Yes," he finally said. "I'm family. She's in the ICU, 3rd floor," the receptionist said, directing him to the elevators. "But visiting is restricted to immediate family only." Harrison nodded his thanks and headed for the elevators, his heart pounding. Family. The word felt foreign on his tongue after decades of isolation. He had built his empire alone, priding himself on needing no one. Now suddenly, he had a great-grandson and what was Rosa to him? The mother of the woman he had abandoned. The great-grandmother of Leo. The ICU waiting room was crowded, with people speaking in hushed tones. In the corner, a small figure sat alone, hunched over a sketchbook. Leo. The boy's face was pale with exhaustion, his eyes red-rimmed from crying or lack of sleep, perhaps both. His fingers moved mechanically across the paper, drawing seeming to be his only comfort. Harrison approached slowly, not wanting to startle him. Leo? The boy looked up, confusion crossing his face before recognition dawned. Mr. Wells? I heard about your grandmother, Harrison said, sitting in the empty chair beside him. I'm sorry. Leo's eyes filled with tears he struggled to hold back. The doctors say her lungs are really bad. She can't breathe on her own. His voice was barely audible. They won't let me see her because I'm not 18. Harrison felt a surge of protectiveness. Let me talk to them. Maybe I can help. Leo looked at him suspiciously. Why are you here? How did you know? Harrison began, then faltered. How could he explain? I came looking for you this morning where we met yesterday. A vendor told me your grandmother might be here. Leo studied him, his gaze disconcertingly perceptive for a child. You never said why you wanted to meet my grandma. Harrison took a deep breath. The truth is, Leo, I think we might be connected. The woman in your drawing yesterday, I knew her. Leo's eyes widened. The lady from my dreams, you knew her? She was my mother, Harrison said softly, the admission feeling like stepping off a cliff. Her name was Elena. Leo's pencil fell from his fingers. Elena, he repeated, the name seeming to resonate with him. But how could I draw her? I never met her. That's what I'm trying to understand, Harrison admitted. May I see what you're drawing now? Leo hesitated, then turned his sketchbook around. Harrison's breath caught. It was a young woman with defiant eyes and a stubborn set to her chin, a face he hadn't seen in 25 years but would recognize anywhere. Sophia, he whispered. You know her too? Leo asked, his voice trembling slightly. Harrison couldn't speak for a moment, emotion clogging his throat. She was someone very important to me once, he finally managed. Leo, the woman you're drawing is your grandmother, Sophia Rivera. Leo stared at the portrait, then back at Harrison, confusion clear on his face. But how do I know what she looks like? Grandma Rosa doesn't have pictures of her. Before Harrison could answer, a doctor approached them, clipboard in hand. Are you here for Rosa Rivera? She asked, her expression professionally neutral. Harrison stood. Yes, how is she? Are you family? The doctor asked, glancing between Harrison and Leo. I'm her great-grandson, Leo said, standing as well. And He paused, looking uncertainly at Harrison. I'm a family friend, Harrison said smoothly. Is there some place we could speak privately? The doctor led them to a small consultation room, its attempts at comfort undermined by the institutional furniture and harsh lighting. Mrs. Rivera's condition is critical, she explained, her tone gentle but direct. The pneumonia has exacerbated her existing COPD. She's on a ventilator now, but her body is very weak. Leo's small hand found Harrison's, gripping it tightly. Harrison squeezed back automatically, surprised by how natural the gesture felt. What are her chances? Harrison asked directly, knowing Leo needed honesty more than false comfort. The doctor hesitated. We're doing everything we can, but given her age and the severity of the infection, she trailed off, looking at Leo apologetically. The next 48 hours will be critical. Can I see her? Leo asked, his voice small. Please? I need to tell her something important. The doctor's expression softened. I'll arrange a brief visit. Just 5 minutes, okay? After she left, Leo turned to Harrison, his eyes filled with a determination that seemed beyond his years. I need to finish the drawing before I see her. Grandma Rosa says the people I draw are watching over us. She says their family I never got to meet sending me messages. Harrison felt a chill run through him. Leo, those people in your drawings, I think they might be our family. Leo nodded as if this confirmed something he had long suspected. That's why you recognized your mom, and now Sophia. He paused, looking down at his incomplete drawing. But why are they coming to me? Why now? Harrison had no answer. He had spent his life dismissing anything that couldn't be explained logically, focusing on concrete realities like property values and profit margins. But Leo's drawings defied rational explanation. I don't know, he admitted, but I'd like to help you find out. He hesitated, then added, and I'd like to help you and your grandmother if you'll let me. Leo studied him with that unsettling perceptiveness again. There's something else, he said. Something you're not telling me. Harrison felt exposed, under the boy's gaze. Before he could respond, the doctor returned to escort Leo to his grandmother's room. Just a few minutes, she reminded them gently. As they followed her through the ICU, Harrison found himself struggling with a decision. Should he tell Leo the truth now? That he was actually his great-grandfather, who had abandoned his pregnant girlfriend all those years ago? That his wealth and success had been built on the foundation of that betrayal? They paused outside Rosa's room. Through the glass, Harrison could see an elderly woman dwarfed by the medical equipment surrounding her. Tubes and wires connected her frail body to machines that beeped and hummed, performing the basic functions her body could no longer manage on its own. Leo, Harrison said urgently, kneeling to the boy's level. Before you go in, there's something you should know about me. Something important. Leo looked at him, those familiar eyes. Sophia's eyes, his mother's eyes, waiting patiently. Harrison began, but was interrupted as a nurse approached. We need to make this quick, she said apologetically. Mrs. Rivera's vitals need to be monitored closely. Leo squeezed Harrison's hand. Tell me after, he said, and followed the nurse into the room. Harrison watched through the glass as Leo approached his grandmother's bedside, the sketchbook clutched tightly to his chest. He saw the boy speak to her, though her eyes remained closed, the ventilator rhythmically pushing air into her damaged lungs. Then Leo opened his sketchbook and carefully placed it where her hand lay on the blanket, moving her fingers to touch the portrait of Sophia. What happened next made Harrison's rational world tilt on its axis. Rosa's eyelids fluttered, open. Her hand moved, seemingly of its own accord, touching the drawing with trembling fingers. Her lips moved around the ventilator tube, forming a word Harrison couldn't hear. And then, impossibly, she smiled. The hospital staff moved with renewed urgency around Rosa's bed. Harrison stood frozen outside the glass, watching as the nurse checked vital signs and called for the doctor. Leo remained at his great-grandmother's side, his small hand still holding hers on top of the drawing. Sir, you need to step back, an orderly said, gently guiding Harrison away from the door as more medical personnel rushed in. What's happening? Harrison demanded, anxiety tightening his chest. Is she worse? The orderly's expression softened. Actually, she's responding. It's unexpected. He glanced through the glass. Sometimes patients surprise us. Harrison found himself guided to a nearby waiting area, where he paced restlessly, unable to sit. The rational part of his mind insisted there had to be a medical explanation for Rosa's sudden responsiveness. But he couldn't shake what he had witnessed, the way her eyes had opened precisely when her fingers touched Leo's drawing. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, Leo emerged from the ICU, escorted by the doctor. The boy's face was transformed, hope replacing the despair that had etched his features earlier. She squeezed my hand, Leo announced, his voice vibrant with excitement. And the doctor says her breathing is better. The doctor nodded, her professional reserve tempered with cautious optimism. Mrs. Rivera has shown unexpected improvement in her oxygen levels. It's too soon to make any predictions, but these are positive signs. Can we stay? Leo asked, looking between the doctor and Harrison. There's a family waiting room down the hall, the doctor said. I'll have someone find you when you can visit again. As they walked to the waiting room, Leo's energy seemed renewed. It was the drawing, he said with absolute certainty. Grandma Rosa saw Sophia, and it helped her. Harrison hesitated, caught between his lifelong skepticism and what he had witnessed. Leo, about what I wanted to tell you earlier. You know who my dad's father was, don't you? Leo interrupted, his perception once again catching Harrison off guard. That's why you recognize Sophia. That's why you're helping us. Harrison guided Leo to a quiet corner of the waiting room, away from other families. Yes, he admitted, his voice low. Leo, Sophia and I, we were together when we were young. I left for college and I didn't know she was pregnant. The simplification of his abandonment felt cowardly, but he couldn't bear to tell this child the full truth yet, that he had known and denied responsibility. Leo processed this information with remarkable composure. So you're my great-grandfather? Harrison nodded, the word feeling surreal. I only realized it yesterday after I saw your drawing of my mother. I had my assistant look into your family and he confirmed it. Is that why I can draw them? Leo asked. Because they're my family too? I don't know, Harrison admitted. I don't understand how you can draw people you've never seen, people who died before you were born. Leo opened his sketchbook to the portrait of Sophia. Grandma Rosa says I have a gift. She says the people I draw chose me to remember them. He looked up at Harrison. Maybe they chose me to find you too. The statement hit Harrison with unexpected force. Had his mother somehow reached across time to reconnect him with the family he had abandoned? It defied logic, challenged everything he believed about the world. Yet here was this boy, his flesh and blood, drawing the faces of their shared past with impossible accuracy. Tell me about your drawings, Harrison said, needing to understand. When did they start? Leo's fingers traced the edge of the sketchbook. After Dad died, I kept having these dreams about people I didn't know. They never spoke, but they looked at me like they knew me. He flipped through pages of portraits, faces of varying ages, each rendered with the same uncanny skill. Drawing them made me feel better, like I wasn't alone. And your grandmother? What does she say about them? She cries sometimes when I show her, especially the ones of Sophia. Leo's voice grew quieter. She told me my dreams were memories that don't belong to me. That sometimes when families are broken, memories find their way back through dreams. Harrison felt a tightness in his throat. Broken families. The legacy he had created with his abandonment. Leo, I want you to know that I'm going to help. You and your grandmother. Whatever happens, you won't be alone. Leo studied him with those old eyes and a young face. Why now? You didn't look for us before. The directness of the question left Harrison without the comfortable shield of half-truths. I was a different person then. Selfish, afraid. He met Leo's gaze directly. I was wrong, Leo. I can't change the past, but I can be here now. Before Leo could respond, a nurse appeared in the doorway. Leo, your grandmother is asking for you. Both Leo and Harrison followed the nurse back to the ICU. Rosa was still connected to the ventilator, but her eyes were open now, alert, and focused. When she saw Leo, a visible wave of relief washed over her face. Then her gaze shifted to Harrison, and her eyes widened with shock and something harder, recognition. She can't speak with the tube, the nurse explained, but she's awake and aware. Try not to excite her. Leo immediately went to his great-grandmother's side, showing her his sketchbook. Look, Grandma Rosa, I finished the drawing of Sophia, and this man, he knows her. He knew all of them. Rosa's gaze never left Harrison's face. Though unable to speak, her eyes communicated volumes: disbelief, anger, accusation. Harrison felt himself flush under her scrutiny, knowing he deserved every ounce of her contempt. "Mrs. Rivera," he said, approaching the bed cautiously. "I'm Harrison Wells. I knew your daughter, Sophia, many years ago." Rosa's eyes narrowed, and her hand moved weakly, reaching for the small whiteboard the nurse had left by her bed. Leo helped her grasp the marker, and with trembling fingers, she wrote 3 words: "Harry Rivera, out." Harrison flinched, as if struck. She knew. Of course she knew. He had abandoned her pregnant daughter, denied his child, and reinvented himself while they struggled alone. "Grandma." Leo looked confused, glancing between them. "His name is Harrison Wells." Rosa shook her head weakly, tapping the whiteboard with the marker for emphasis. "Leo," Harrison said quietly, "your great-grandmother is right. I was born Harry Rivera. I changed my name when I was 18. "Why?" Leo asked, the simple question cutting to the heart of Harrison's carefully constructed identity. Before Harrison could answer, Rosa was writing again, her determination giving her strength. When she turned the whiteboard, the message was clear. He left Sophia pregnant, denied Michael. Leo's face paled as understanding dawned. "You knew about my dad? You knew and you didn't help us?" Harrison reached for words that wouldn't come. How could he explain decades of selfish choices to this child? But Leo had stepped away from him, moving closer to Rosa's side, his expression hardening. "You lied. You said you didn't know she was pregnant." "I was young and selfish," Harrison admitted, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. "I convinced myself it wasn't my responsibility." Rosa was writing again, her message brief but devastating. Still selfish? Why here now? It was the question Harrison had been asking himself since yesterday. Why did he care now after a lifetime of indifference? Was it mere curiosity about Leo's inexplicable ability to draw his ancestors? Or was it something deeper, a chance at redemption he hadn't realized he was seeking? "The drawings," he said finally. "I saw Leo's drawing of my mother and it changed something in me." He looked at Leo, who was watching him with guarded eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to help, if you'll let me." Rosa's eyes bore into him, decades of hurt and anger visible in her gaze. Slowly, painfully, she wrote again, "Prove it. Not with money." Leo looked at the message, then back at Harrison. "We don't need your money," he said, echoing his words from their first meeting. "We've managed all this time without you." Harrison felt the weight of their judgment, knowing it was deserved. But beneath the shame was something unexpected: determination. For the first time in decades, he wanted something that couldn't be bought, something his wealth and power couldn't secure, a connection to the family he had discarded. "I understand," he said quietly. "I'll prove it, if you'll give me the chance." The moment was interrupted by a nurse entering to check Rosa's vitals. "I'm sorry, but visiting time is over. Mrs. Rivera needs to rest." As they were ushered out, Harrison noticed Leo had left his sketchbook beside Rosa's bed, open to the portrait of Sophia. The last thing he saw before the door closed was Rosa's hand moving to touch the drawing, tears sliding silently down her weathered cheeks. The hospital corridor felt endless as Harrison walked away from Rosa's room, Leo keeping a deliberate distance between them. The boy's shoulders were rigid with tension, his earlier openness replaced by a wariness that pierced Harrison more deeply than he had expected. "I'll take you back to the waiting room," Harrison offered quietly. "I'm not leaving the hospital," Leo said, his voice firm despite its softness. "Grandma Rosa needs me." "Of course," Harrison nodded. "But you need to rest too. When was the last time you ate something?" Leo shrugged, unwilling to acknowledge his hunger. The gesture was so familiar. The same stubborn pride Harrison had carried as a boy, refusing help even when desperately needed. There's a cafeteria downstairs, Harrison said. Let me at least buy you dinner. Leo hesitated, then nodded reluctantly, his need for sustenance overriding his desire to maintain distance. The hospital cafeteria was nearly empty. At this hour, the fluorescent lighting harsh against the institutional beige walls. Leo selected a sandwich, an apple, and chocolate milk, while Harrison contented himself with black coffee. They sat at a corner table, the silence between them heavy with unspoken accusations. Why did you lie to me? Leo finally asked, his eyes fixed on his sandwich rather than Harrison. Harrison took a deep breath. The question deserved honesty, however uncomfortable. Because I was ashamed, he admitted. Because it's easier to say I didn't know than to admit I knew and walked away anyway. Leo looked up at that, his gaze piercing. Did you ever think about them? About my dad? No, Harrison said, the truth bitter on his tongue. I convinced myself they weren't my responsibility. I told myself Sophia would be fine without me, that it might not even be my child. He stared into his coffee. I was wrong, Leo, so wrong. My dad wasn't fine, Leo said quietly. Grandma Rosa said he was always looking for something. That's why he started using drugs. Harrison felt the weight of those words like physical blows, the consequences of his abandonment cascading through generations, his son seeking solace in substances, dying young, leaving Leo orphaned and homeless. I can't change the past, Harrison said, his voice rough with emotion. I wish I could, but I can try to make things better now. How? Leo challenged. Grandma Rosa is right, it's not about money. Harrison considered the question carefully. What could he possibly offer this family that would make up for decades of absence? Not his wealth, clearly. What else did he have? I don't know yet, he admitted. But I'm going to figure it out. I promise you that. They finished their meal in silence, Leo consuming his food with the efficient hunger of someone accustomed to not knowing when the next meal might come. When they returned to the waiting room, a nurse informed them that Rosa was sleeping comfortably, her condition stabilized. You should rest too, Harrison told Leo, noticing the exhaustion evident in the boy's drooping shoulders. There's a hotel across the street. We could get a room, be back first thing in the morning. Leo shook his head. I'm staying here. Leo, you need proper sleep. I said I'm staying, Leo interrupted, a flash of his grandmother's stubbornness evident in his tone. You can go to your hotel if you want. Harrison recognized the futility of arguing. Then I'll stay too. He arranged with the nurses to bring extra blankets, and they created a makeshift bed for Leo on the waiting room couch. Despite his determination to remain vigilant, the boy's exhaustion soon overcame him and he fell into a deep sleep. Harrison kept watch from an uncomfortable chair nearby, studying the child's face in repose. The resemblance to Sophia was stronger when Leo slept, the stubborn set of his jaw relaxing to reveal her delicate features. There were echoes of Michael, too, from the single photograph Harrison's assistant had found online, an obituary that summarized his son's short, troubled life in 3 brief sentences. And there, in the curve of Leo's eyelashes against his cheeks, Harrison could see his own mother. Family. The word that had meant so little to him for so long now kept him anchored to this uncomfortable chair in a hospital waiting room, watching over a sleeping child who had every reason to hate him. Around 3 in the morning, Leo began to stir restlessly, his hands twitching as if reaching for something. Suddenly he sat bolt upright, eyes wide but unfocused. Leo. Harrison moved closer, concerned. Are you okay? Leo didn't respond immediately, his gaze fixed on something Harrison couldn't see. Then, with purposeful movements, he reached for his backpack and extracted a fresh sheet of paper and a pencil. Without a word, he began to draw, his hands moving with the same uncanny precision Harrison had witnessed on the street corner. Harrison watched, transfixed, as a face emerged on the paper. A young man, perhaps in his early 20s, with Leo's eyes in Sophia's mouth but a jawline that was unmistakably Harrison's own. Michael, his son whom he had never met. Leo, Harrison whispered. Are you awake? Leo continued drawing as if he hadn't heard, adding details with swift, sure strokes. A small scar above the right eyebrow, a dimple in the left cheek, a tentative smile that seemed to hold both. Hope and wariness. He's trying to tell me something, Leo suddenly said, his voice oddly distant. But I can't hear him. I never can. Harrison felt a chill run down his spine. Who, Leo? Who's trying to tell you something? My dad, Leo replied, his pencil never stopping. He comes to me in dreams sometimes, but he never speaks, he just looks sad. Harrison's rational mind searched for explanations. The boy was dreaming, or his subconscious was constructing an image of his father from Rosa's descriptions. But there was something about the specific details, the life captured in the portrait, that defied logical explanation. I think he forgives you, Leo said, the statement so unexpected that Harrison's breath caught. What? My dad, Leo clarified, his hand finally stilling as he completed the portrait. In my dream, he was looking at you, and he nodded, like this. Leo demonstrated a slow, solemn nod. Grandma Rosa says that when people appear in my dreams, they're trying to heal something broken. Harrison stared at the portrait of the son he had never known, throat tight with an emotion he couldn't name. I don't deserve his forgiveness. Maybe it's not about deserving, Leo said, sounding far older than his 10 years. Maybe it's about what he needs to move on. The wisdom in those words struck Harrison silent. This child, who had endured more loss in his short life than most people experience in decades, somehow possessed an understanding that had eluded Harrison through all his years of wealth and success. As dawn broke, a doctor appeared in the waiting room doorway. Leo, your grandmother is asking for you. She glanced at Harrison. Both of you, actually. They found Rosa sitting up in bed, the ventilator removed and replaced with a nasal cannula providing supplemental oxygen. Her face was still drawn with illness, but her eyes were clear and alert. When she saw Leo, her expression softened with love. When her gaze shifted to Harrison, it hardened, not with the anger of yesterday, but with a challenging assessment. Leo immediately showed her the portrait he had drawn during the night. I saw Dad, Grandma. He was trying to tell me something. Rosa's fingers trembled as she touched the drawing. Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded as if confirming something she had long suspected. Then she gestured for the whiteboard. With slow, deliberate movements, she wrote, Family heals through him. Through who, Grandma? Leo asked, confused. Rosa pointed at Leo, then at the sketchbook filled with portraits of family members he had never met. Through me? Leo whispered. But how? Rosa wrote again. The gift chooses, shows what was lost, heals what was broken. Harrison stepped closer, trying to understand. Mrs. Rivera, are you saying Leo's ability to draw people he's never seen is some kind of healing gift? Rosa gave him a look that questioned his intelligence, then wrote, You found us because of Elena's portrait, not coincidence. Harrison couldn't argue with that. If he hadn't seen Leo's drawing of his mother, he would have walked past the boy without a second glance, continuing his life of isolated wealth while his family struggled in poverty. What do we do now? He asked, directing the question to Rosa rather than Leo, acknowledging her authority in this family he had abandoned. Rosa studied him for a long moment, her lifetime of hardship evident in the lines of her face. Then, she wrote 4 simple words that would change everything. Bring them all home. 3 months later, Harrison stood in the foyer of his penthouse surveying the changes. The sleek, impersonal space that had once reflected his isolation had been transformed. Family photographs now adorned walls that had previously showcased expensive but emotionally empty artwork. A child's jacket hung on the coat rack beside his own. School books and sketching supplies cluttered a table that had once held only decorative objects chosen by his interior designer. Are they here yet? Leo called, racing down the hallway with the boundless energy of a 10-year-old. Not yet, Harrison replied, checking his watch. The doctor said they'd release her around noon. Today was the day Rosa would finally leave the rehabilitation facility where she had spent the past 2 months recovering. Her pneumonia had eventually cleared, but the illness had left her weaker, requiring intensive physical therapy to regain her strength. Harrison had ensured she received the best care possible, not by throwing money at the problem as he once would have, but by being present, attentive, questioning the doctors, learning her treatment protocol, and supporting Leo through the process. "Is everything ready in her room?" Leo asked, adjusting the collar of the button-down shirt he had insisted on wearing for the occasion. "We checked it twice, remember?" Harrison smiled at the boy's nervousness. "The bed is set up exactly as the occupational therapist suggested, with all her medications organized on the nightstand." In the weeks following Rosa's hospitalization, Harrison had made good on his promise to bring them all home. He had converted his spare bedroom into a comfortable space for Rosa and the home office into a room for Leo, complete with an artist's desk positioned to catch the morning light. Each step had required Rosa's approval, communicated through nods, or brief notes as she regained her strength. Her grudging acceptance had gradually evolved into a cautious partnership as she recognized Harrison's genuine commitment. For Leo, the transition had been both easier and more complex. The material comforts of Harrison's home were a marked improvement from the shelter, but more significant was the stability it provided, a permanent address that allowed him to enroll in a nearby school, regular meals, a quiet place to draw. Yet the boy remained guarded in some ways, still processing the revelation about his family history and Harrison's place in it. The intercom buzzed, interrupting Harrison's thoughts. "Mr. Wells, your car has arrived," the doorman announced. "Thank you, Richard. We'll be right down." The ride to the rehabilitation facility was filled with Leo's excited chatter about the welcome dinner he had helped plan for his great-grandmother. Harrison listened indulgently, marveling at how this child had upended his carefully ordered existence. 3 months ago, his calendar had been filled with business meetings and real estate developments. Now it included school pickups, doctor's appointments, and art supply shopping. At the facility, they found Rosa dressed and waiting, her weathered face lighting up when she saw Leo. Though still thin, her color had improved significantly, and she moved with more confidence as she rose to embrace her great-grandson. "Ready to go home, Grandma?" Leo asked, taking her hand. Rosa nodded, then turned to Harrison with an appraising look. In the months of her recovery, their relationship had evolved into something neither had anticipated. Not friendship exactly, but a mutual respect born of their shared love for Leo. She had not forgiven Harrison for abandoning Sophia, but she had allowed him the chance to atone by caring for her and Leo. As they helped Rosa into the car, Harrison noticed Leo had brought his sketchbook, the one containing all the family portraits. The boy hadn't drawn any new family members since Michael, but he often revisited the earlier drawings, especially during moments of stress or transition. "I'm going to show Grandma where I put all the portraits," Leo told Harrison as they drove. "I hung them in the hallway between our rooms, so it's like they're watching over us when we sleep." Harrison caught Rosa's gaze in the rearview mirror, a question in his eyes. She gave a small nod of approval, her acceptance of his efforts to honor the family he had once rejected. When they arrived at the penthouse, Harrison and Leo guided Rosa through the space that would now be her home. She moved slowly, taking in the changes Harrison had made to accommodate her needs. The grab bars in the bathroom, the raised seating, the emergency call system. But it was the hallway of portraits that finally brought tears to her eyes. Leo had insisted on framing each drawing properly. Elena, Sophia, Michael, and others Harrison hadn't recognized. Distant relatives from Rosa's side of the family. Each portrait hung at the same height, creating a gallery of faces that spanned generations. Beneath each frame, a small plaque provided the name and relationship. Elena Rivera Wells, great-great-grandmother, and Michael Rivera, father. "It's our family tree," Leo explained to Rosa, who touched each frame gently, "so no one gets forgotten again." That evening, after a quiet celebration dinner and helping Rosa settle into her new room, Harrison found Leo on the balcony, sketching as the sun set over the city. He sat down beside the boy, content to watch in silence as Leo's pencil moved across the paper. "It's you," Leo said after a while, tilting the sketchbook so Harrison could see. Harrison stared at the portrait, struck by what Leo had captured. Not just his physical features, but something deeper. The hardness that had once defined his expression was softened, the defensive pride replaced by something more vulnerable and genuine. "Is that really how you see me now?" Harrison asked quietly. Leo considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "It's who you're becoming," he finally said. "Grandma Rosa says people can change if they really want to." "Do you believe that?" Harrison asked, the question more important to him than he wanted to admit. Leo set down his pencil and looked directly at Harrison. "I didn't at first, but then I saw how you stayed with us at the hospital, even when Grandma was mad at you, and how you learned all about her medicines and talked to all the doctors." He paused. "And you didn't just give us money. You gave us your time." The simple observation humbled Harrison more than any business success ever had. Time, the one resource he had always guarded jealously, parceling it out in careful increments to maximize efficiency and profit. Now he gave it freely to this boy and his great-grandmother, and in doing so had received something far more valuable in return. "Leo," Harrison said carefully, "I want you to know something. No matter what happens, this is your home now, yours and your grandmother's. I've made legal arrangements to ensure you'll always be taken care of, even if something happens to me." Leo absorbed this information with a solemn nod. "Because we're family." "Yes?" Harrison confirmed, the word no longer foreign on his tongue. "Because we're family." As if summoned by the conversation, Rosa appeared in the doorway, moving slowly with her walker. Harrison immediately stood to help her to a chair, but she waved him off, determined to manage on her own. "Feeling okay?" Leo asked, concern evident in his voice. Rosa nodded, then gestured toward the sketchbook in Leo's hands. The boy handed it to her without hesitation, watching as she studied the portrait of Harrison. After a long moment, Rosa reached for the pen and small notepad she now carried for communication. Though her voice was gradually returning, she still preferred writing for important matters. Her hand moved slowly but deliberately across the page. The message brief, but impactful. "Family portrait, all of us together." Leo's face lit up at the suggestion. "You mean like a proper family picture, with all three of us?" Rosa nodded, then fixed Harrison with a meaningful look. The request wasn't just about documenting their unusual family unit. It was an acknowledgement, an acceptance that he was now part of it. "I'd be honored," Harrison said, emotion making his voice rough. As Leo eagerly turned to a fresh page in his sketchbook, Harrison watched the boy position Rosa and himself on either side of an empty chair, directing them with the confidence of an experienced artist. "I'll sit there when I'm done," Leo explained, stepping back to study the composition. "I'll use the timer on my phone to take a reference photo." While Leo set up his impromptu studio, Harrison found himself standing beside Rosa, both of them watching the boy they had each nearly lost, in different ways. "Thank you," Harrison said quietly to Rosa, "for allowing me the chance to know him, to know both of you." Rosa studied him, her eyes still sharp despite her physical frailty. Then she wrote again, a message meant for him alone. Elena would be proud. Harrison's throat tightened at the mention of his mother. "I hope so," he managed to say. "Ready?" Leo called, setting his phone timer and hurrying to sit between them. As they posed together, the wealthy developer who had abandoned his family, the resilient great-grandmother who had held it together, and the gifted boy who had somehow bridged the divide between them. Harrison realized that Leo's mysterious ability to draw family members he had never met had accomplished something, even more remarkable than revealing the past. It had created a future none of them could have imagined 3 months ago. A future where the portraits on the wall were no longer just memories of what had been lost, but reminders of what had been found. The broken pieces of a family finally brought home. If you made it to the end, maybe you felt what I felt. Some stories don't end, they heal. So if you believe that art, memory, and love can bring families back together, hit that subscribe button. Don't miss the next story that just might change the way you see the world. I'll be right here waiting.